Brother Sergeant Castor had killed his first heretic at age 12. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. Neophytes weren't supposed to see combat until their gene seed had fully integrated, until their bodies had been transformed into something more than human. But the Orc warband hadn't cared about protocol. They'd smashed through the fortress monastery's outer defenses during a training exercise, and Castor, still just a boy named Jaren then, had found himself face to face with a green skin twice his size. He remembered the fear, the way his heart had hammered against his ribs, the certainty that he was about to die. But he grabbed a fallen bolter anyway, too heavy for his child's arms, and pulled the trigger. The recoil had broken his shoulder. The bolt round had taken the Orc's head clean off. His training sergeant had found him there, bleeding and crying, still holding the weapon. "Good," the sergeant had said. "Now you know what fear feels like. Remember it, because once you become an Astartes, you'll never feel it again." The sergeant had been right. Mostly, the gene seed changed everything. The surgeries, the hypno-conditioning, the psycho-indoctrination, they didn't just make Castor stronger and faster. They rewired his brain, stripped away the chemicals that caused panic, suppressed the instincts that made mortals freeze or flee. By the time he received his power armor and took his first oath, fear had become a distant memory, an abstract concept he understood intellectually but couldn't actually experience. He'd fought for 83 years without feeling it. 83 years of war across 17 systems. He'd killed tyranids by the hundred, burned heretics alive, stood his ground while demon princes screamed reality apart around him. He'd done it all without hesitation, without doubt, without fear, until the day he met something that brought it all back. They were clearing a space hulk in the Ghoul Stars sector. Standard operation. The massive derelict had been drifting through the warp for Emperor knows how long, accumulating ships and debris like a metal tumor. Intelligence suggested gene stealer presence. Maybe some residual chaos corruption. Nothing a single squad of Astartes couldn't handle. Castor led his team through the twisted corridors of what had once been an Imperial cruiser. The geometry was all wrong. Bulkheads bent at angles that hurt to look at. Corridors that seemed to stretch farther than the ship's exterior dimensions should allow. His autosenses kept glitching, showing movement in empty spaces, detecting heat signatures that vanished when he looked directly at them. "Something's wrong with this place," Brother Taldrin voxed. "My armor's machine spirit is..." He stopped mid-sentence. Castor spun toward him, bolter raised. Taldrin stood frozen in the corridor, his helmet aimed at something Castor couldn't see. His entire body had gone rigid. Not the stance of an Astartes preparing for combat. The stance of someone who'd been paralyzed. "Taldrin, report." No response. "Brother Taldrin, respond." Nothing. Just the sound of Taldrin's breathing over the vox. Rapid and shallow. Panicked breathing. Impossible for an Astartes, but there it was. Castor moved toward him carefully, scanning for threats. The corridor appeared empty. No contacts on auspex. No thermal signatures. No, he saw it. Not with his eyes. With something deeper. A presence that pressed against his consciousness like a weight. Like standing at the edge of a cliff and feeling gravity's pull even though nothing was pushing you. And in that moment, for the first time in 83 years, Brother Sergeant Castor felt genuine primal fear. Because the thing looking back at him through the darkness knew his name. His real name. The one he'd had before the chapter. Before the gene seed. Before he'd been reborn as an Astartes. It whispered, "Hello, Jaren. This is the story of the only enemy that can truly terrify an Astartes. Not through physical threat. Not through overwhelming force. But through something far worse. Something that strikes at the one vulnerability the Emperor's finest cannot armor against. Before we go deeper into this nightmare, I need you to do something. Drop a comment below telling me what you think could actually scare a space marine. Because most people get this wrong. They think it's about bigger weapons or scarier monsters. But the real answer is so much worse than that. Share your theories. Let's see who actually understands what fear means to a post-human warrior. Now let me take you back to that corridor. Let me show you what happened when Brother Sergeant Castor encountered something that shouldn't exist. An Astartes is not human. This is fundamental. This is the point. The Emperor designed them to transcend humanity's weaknesses. Fear, doubt, hesitation. These are mortal frailties, stripped away through gene engineering and psycho-conditioning until what remains is pure function. A weapon that thinks. But weapons don't have memories. Except they do. Buried deep beneath the hypno-indoctrination and the years of combat conditioning, every Astartes carries fragments of who they were before. A child's memory of sunlight, a mother's voice singing, the smell of cooking food in a Hablock kitchen. These memories are suppressed, locked away, considered irrelevant to the warrior's purpose, until something calls them forward. Castor stood in the darkness of the space hulk, his enhanced physiology flooding his system with combat stimulants that should have sharpened his focus and steadied his aim. Instead, his hands trembled, just slightly, just enough that the barrel of his bolter wavered by millimeters. It was impossible. Astartes' hands didn't tremble. Jaren? The voice came again, and this time Castor realized it wasn't coming from the darkness ahead. It was coming from inside his helmet, inside his head. Do you remember me? He tried to speak, to demand identification, to call for support from his squad. But his throat had locked. Another impossibility. Gene-enhanced vocal cords didn't fail, didn't cease, didn't forget how to form words. Except his did. Brother Taldrin still hadn't moved. Castor could see him standing 3 meters ahead, frozen mid-step. The rest of the squad had stopped too. 5 Astartes locked in place like statues. Their armor's power systems still functioned. The servos hummed. The reactors pulsed. But the warriors inside had simply stopped. You killed me, the voice said conversationally. Do you remember? You were 9 years old. It was an accident, of course. You didn't mean to push me. But the manufacturum's scaffolding was old, rusted. When I fell, the metal gave way beneath me. 300 meters down into the smelting pit. Castor's mind lurched. He did remember. Not clearly, not completely, but fragments. A boy's face. An argument about something trivial. A shove. A scream that cut off too quickly. They'd told him it was an accident. The Arbites had investigated and cleared him. The boy's family had even accepted compensation. It was closed. Forgotten. Irrelevant. Except it wasn't forgotten. They never found my body, the voice continued. The heat was too intense. I was ash before I hit the bottom. But do you know what happens to souls that die in anger, Jaren? Souls that die confused and hurt and wondering why their best friend just killed them. The darkness ahead rippled. Not physically. It was more like reality itself flinched. And in that ripple, Castor saw something take shape. Not a person. Not a demon. Something in between. A figure made of shadow and memory, wearing the face of a boy who'd been dead for 70 years. We linger, the thing said. Brother Taldrin was drowning. Not in water. In memory. His consciousness had been ripped backward through time, through the barriers of psycho-conditioning, through every mental defense his chapter had installed in his mind. He was 8 years old again, living in the underhive of Vostroya, watching his sister die of the wasting cough because their family couldn't afford medicine. He'd forgotten her name. The conditioning had taken that, made it irrelevant. You couldn't be an Astartes and carry that kind of grief. It would slow you down, make you hesitate. But now he remembered. Katia. Her name was Katia, and she died whispering his name while he held her hand. And standing in front of him, wearing his sister's face, was something that knew exactly how much that memory hurt. Why didn't you save me? She asked. Not with her voice. She'd never had this voice. This was the voice of the warp, wearing her shape like a stolen coat. You became so strong, so powerful. You could have come back. Could have used your chapter's resources to help our family. But you didn't, did you? You forgot about us the moment they put that gene seed in your chest. Taldrin tried to move, tried to raise his bolter, tried to do anything. But his body refused. Because every combat reflex, every trained response, Every bit of martial discipline his chapter had beaten into him was designed for external threats. For enemies you could see and kill, not for enemies that already lived inside your head. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and the words surprised him because he hadn't said them in 74 years, hadn't even thought them. Apologies were weakness. Regret was inefficiency. But he felt them now. All of them. Every moment of grief and guilt and loss that the conditioning had locked away, flooding back in a single overwhelming wave. The thing wearing Kadia's face smiled. It wasn't her smile. It was too wide. Too many teeth. But the eyes were right. The eyes were exactly how he remembered them. "You're not sorry enough," it said. "But you will be. In the 41st millennium, there are countless ways to die. Bolter fire, chainsword, artillery bombardment, orbital strike, tyranid bioweapon, orc choppa, necron gauss flare. The galaxy is an endless catalog of violent ends, and Astartes are trained to face all of them without flinching. But there's one death they don't prepare for. One threat that no amount of power, armor, or gene enhancement can deflect. The death of the self. That's what was happening to Castor's squad. Not physical death. Psychological death. The thing on the space Hulk, whatever it was, wasn't killing their bodies. It was killing who they thought they were. Stripping away the Astartes identity layer by layer until what remained was the scared, hurt child underneath. Brother Kelvane was 8, watching his father hang for heresy. Brother Guthrin was 6, hiding in rubble while orcs butchered his settlement. Brother Makar was 12, too weak to complete the aspirant trials, knowing he'd failed and would be mind-wiped for servitor duty. Every one of them was living their worst memory. The moment that had broken them before the chapter put them back together as weapons. And standing in front of each of them was something wearing a familiar face. Something that knew exactly what words would hurt most. Exactly what truth would cut deepest. Castor fought it. He was a sergeant. A veteran. He'd led squads through worse than this. He'd held his ground when demons were literally eating reality around him. He would not break. Could not break. "You're not real," he said aloud, forcing the words past the paralysis. "You're just a warp manifestation. A psychic echo. I faced demons before. This is just another demon." The thing wearing his dead friend's face laughed. "Oh, Jaren, I'm so much worse than a demon. Demons are simple. Demons want to corrupt you, kill you, feed on your soul. I don't want any of that." He stepped closer. Castor's finger tightened on his bolter's trigger, but the weapon didn't fire. The machine spirit itself seemed reluctant. "I just want you to remember," the thing said softly. "Remember what you were before they turned you into this. Remember all the people you left behind. All the promises you broke. All the humanity you sacrificed to become the Emperor's perfect soldier." It reached out with one shadow-formed hand and touched Castor's helmet. "I want you to feel what you gave up." And Castor remembered. He was Jaren again, 9 years old, terrified, standing on the manufacturum's scaffolding with his best friend's blood on his hands. Except it hadn't been blood. It had been rust, brown and flaking. The hand had slipped. The scaffolding had given way. But in the remembering, in the raw, unchained memory without the conditioning to dull it, Castor felt everything. The guilt, the shame, the crushing knowledge that he'd killed someone. That even if it was an accident, even if no one blamed him, he knew. He would always know. He saw himself in the years after, withdrawn, angry, volunteering for the chapter trials not because he wanted to serve the Emperor but because he wanted to escape. Wanted to become something else. Someone who didn't have to carry that memory. He saw the conditioning, the hypno-indoctrination, the careful psychological architecture his chapter's apothecaries built inside his mind, sealing away everything that made him Jaren and leaving only Castor. The warrior, the weapon, the thing that couldn't feel guilt because guilt implied conscience and conscience implied humanity. And he understood. The chapter hadn't saved him. They'd hidden him, given him armor to wear and enemies to kill so he'd never have to face what he'd done. But the armor was a lie. The conditioning was a cage. And underneath all of it, Jaren had never left. He'd just been buried alive inside a transhuman shell. "Do you see now?" the thing whispered. "This is what you are. What you've always been. A frightened child wearing a monster's skin. Pretending the skin is who you really are." Castor felt his knees buckle. Felt his enhanced physiology rebel against the emotional overload. Felt something inside him that had survived 83 years of warfare finally start to crack. Because the thing was right. He wasn't Brother Sergeant Castor. He never had been. He was just Jaren, 9 years old and terrified, playing pretend in armor too big for him. And he'd been pretending for 70 years. The thing that killed Astartes wasn't a monster. It had been human once. Or maybe it had been many humans. The warp doesn't respect individual identity. When souls die in proximity, die in similar ways, die with similar regrets, sometimes they merge. Pool together like blood running into a drain. What emerges isn't any of the original people. It's an amalgamation, a gestalt. All the grief and anger and unfinished business fused into something that barely remembers what it means to be singular. The Imperium has names for these things. Psychana, Geist, Revenant-class warp entities. The Ordo Malleus classifies them as minor threats. Dangerous to mortals, certainly, but easily banished by sanctioned psychers. No real concern for trained warriors. Except no one had considered what happens when one of these things encounters an Astartes. Because Astartes are supposed to be immune, their conditioning protects them. Their enhanced psychology renders them resistant to psychic manipulation. They're taught to recognize warp corruption and resist it through sheer force of will. But this wasn't corruption. This was recognition. The thing on the Space Hulk wasn't trying to turn the Astartes to chaos. It was trying to make them remember what they'd given up. Make them face the cost of becoming transhuman. And against that kind of attack, all the gene seed in the galaxy was useless. Brother Taldrin broke first. He was still staring at the thing wearing his sister's face when something inside him simply gave up. The conditioning that had held him together for 7 decades fractured like glass under pressure. And through the cracks, everything he'd suppressed came flooding out. He tore his helmet off, threw it aside with enough force to dent the bulkhead. His face was streaming with tears, and Astartes crying. It should have been impossible. "I'm sorry," he said again, louder this time. "Katia, I'm sorry. I should have stayed. Should have helped. Should have been human." The thing finished for him. "Should have kept your soul instead of trading it for strength. But you didn't. You chose this. Chose to become a monster who kills in the Emperor's name and calls it duty." Taldrin's hands went to his armor's chest plate, fingers scrabbling at the seals. "Get it off. I need to get it off. This isn't me. This was never me. I'm not." He never finished the sentence. His body rebelled. The gene seed, sensing psychological trauma that threatened the host's functionality, flooded his system with emergency combat drugs. Adrenaline, stimulants, compounds designed to override conscious thought and reduce the Astartes to pure fighting instinct. It should have saved him. Should have burned away the emotional breakdown and left only the warrior. Instead, it killed him, because the gene seed didn't understand what was happening, didn't comprehend that the threat wasn't external. The combat drugs sharpened Taldrin's awareness right when he needed it dulled, made him feel every moment of the psychological collapse with crystal clarity. His enhanced physiology, trying desperately to help, amplified the trauma until it became unbearable. His third heart simply stopped, then his second, then his primary. Brother Taldrin collapsed without a sound, dead not from any wound but from the sheer overwhelming weight of remembering what it cost to become an Astartes. Castor watched him fall and felt something inside himself tighten like a wire about to snap. The squad Vox erupted with panic transmissions. "Taldrin's vitals are flatline. I can't move, my armor won't respond. Something's in my head. It knows my mother's name. Get out of my skull. Get out, get out." Every warrior was experiencing their own private nightmare, their own personal haunting. The thing on the Space Hulk had fragmented itself, or maybe it had always been fragments, and each piece had found an Astartes to torment. Brother Makar was screaming, actually screaming, a sound no Astartes should be capable of making. His armor's vox carried it across the channel in crackling bursts. He was seeing the moment he'd failed his chapter's trials, the moment he'd been declared insufficient, the moment they'd stripped away his name and prepared him for servitor conversion. Except in his timeline, he'd passed the trials. His memory was false, implanted, part of his conditioning. But the thing made him believe it was true, made him feel the terror of knowing he'd failed and would be mind-wiped, and his psyche couldn't handle the contradiction. His gene seed went into crisis. Preomner shutdown, amophagia rejection. His body, engineered for perfection, began tearing itself apart because the psychological trauma was severe enough to trigger catastrophic biological failure. Brother Kelvane was next. He dropped his bolter and was clawing at his own armor, trying to reach something underneath, trying to hurt himself, because the thing wearing his father's face was telling him that his whole life had been a lie, that his father had been innocent, that the Imperium had executed a loyal servant on false charges, that Kelvane had become an Astartes to serve the very system that had murdered his family. "I killed for them," Kelvane was muttering. "For 80 years I killed for them, for the people who hanged my father, for the Imperium that destroyed everything I loved." His armor's emergency protocols kicked in, sedating him, but it was too late. His mind had already broken. The sedatives just meant he stopped moving. His eyes stayed open, empty, staring at nothing. Castor watched his squad fall apart one by one and understood with cold certainty what was happening. This was the enemy, not the thing wearing his dead friend's face. Not the warp entity or geist or whatever classification the Inquisition would eventually assign it. The enemy was truth. The truth that Astartes weren't transcendent warriors. They were traumatized children given superhuman bodies and pointed at the Imperium's enemies. The truth that the conditioning didn't erase their humanity. It just buried it alive. The truth that every one of them carried wounds that no amount of gene engineering could heal. And this thing, whatever it was, had learned how to weaponize that truth. "Why?" Castor asked. His voice was steadier now. The shock had passed. What remained was a strange kind of clarity. The clarity that comes when you're watching something inevitable unfold and realize there's nothing you can do to stop it. The thing tilted its head. The gesture was wrong, inhuman. Whatever soul had once inhabited the boy's body was long gone. What remained was just warp stuff wearing a familiar shape. "Why what? Why show us this? What do you gain from breaking us?" "Gain." The thing seemed to consider the word. "I don't gain anything. I'm not a demon. I don't feed on suffering or collect souls. I'm just what remains. The parts of humanity that couldn't become Astartes. The people who were left behind. The memories that were suppressed. We're the cost of your perfection, Jaren." It gestured to the frozen squad members around them. "Each of you was built on a foundation of discarded humanity. Childhoods erased. Families forgotten. Identities buried. Your chapters took children and killed who they were to make room for weapons. And we're what's left. The ghosts of everyone you used to be. We serve the Emperor," Castor said automatically. "We protect humanity. Our sacrifice has meaning." "Does it?" The thing stepped closer. "Look at what you're protecting. An Imperium that feeds millions into furnaces to keep one corpse on a throne. That turns children into servitors. That burns entire worlds for the crime of asking questions. You're not protecting humanity, Jaren. You're protecting the thing that's destroying it." Castor raised his bolter. The weapon felt heavier than it should. Or maybe his arms were just tired. 70 years of holding this gun. 70 years of killing in the Emperor's name. "I could shoot you," he said quietly. "You could. The bolt will pass right through me. Warp entities don't have bodies to destroy. But you know that. You've fought demons before. You know how this works." The thing smiled. "The real question is, do you want to? Because part of you, the part that's still Jaren underneath all the conditioning, part of you wants to listen. Wants to know if I'm right." And that was the truly terrifying thing. Because Castor did want to listen. And Astartes is trained to resist torture. Physical pain is irrelevant. You can pull off their fingernails, break their bones, burn their flesh. They'll endure it. The gene seed makes them almost immune to shock. The conditioning teaches them to separate consciousness from sensation. Pain becomes just data, information to be acknowledged and ignored. Psychological torture is harder but still manageable. Threats mean nothing to someone who's already dead inside. Promises of mercy are pointless to warriors who don't value their own survival above their mission. You can show them horrors, show them their brothers dying, show them worlds burning. They'll watch without flinching. But this wasn't torture. This was therapy. The thing on the Space Hulk wasn't trying to break Castor through pain or fear. It was trying to heal him, show him the wounds he'd been ignoring for 70 years, make him acknowledge the cost of what he'd become. And that was infinitely worse than any physical suffering. "You're thinking about it," the thing said, "not gloating, just observing, wondering if I'm right, if maybe the Imperium isn't worth what you've sacrificed for it." Castor's grip on his bolter tightened. The Emperor protects. The Emperor is a corpse who hasn't spoken in 10,000 years. Whatever he's protecting, it isn't you. Heresy. Truth. The thing moved closer. Close enough that Castor could have struck it with his combat knife. Not that it would have mattered. But here's the really interesting part, Jaren. You know I'm right. Deep down, underneath all the conditioning and hypno-indoctrination you've always known. That's why the chapter spends so much time reinforcing your loyalty. Why the prayers are mandatory. Why dissent is punished so harshly. Because if you ever stop and think about what you're actually doing, what you've actually become, the whole system falls apart. Brother Guthrin was still frozen nearby. His helmet turned toward something only he could see. His breathing had gone ragged, unstable. Not the steady rhythm of an Astartes in combat, but the panicked gasps of someone drowning. "He's seeing his family die," the thing said conversationally. "Over and over. The memory has been suppressed for 60 years. But it's still there, still fresh. Pain doesn't fade in the warp, Jaren. Crystallizes, becomes eternal. Every hurt you've ever pushed down, every loss you've ever ignored, it's all still there, waiting. What do you want from us?" Castor asked. His voice was quiet now, tired. "I want you to choose." "Choose what?" The thing gestured toward the corridor ahead. "You can keep going. Keep being Brother Sergeant Castor. Keep killing for the Imperium. Keep pretending you're something more than a traumatized child with a gun. The conditioning will reassert itself eventually. You'll forget this conversation. Lock it away with all the other uncomfortable truths. And you'll serve faithfully until something finally manages to kill you." Paused. "Or you can remember, really remember, accept what you are and what you've done. Stop hiding behind the armor and the title and the Emperor's supposed protection. Be human again, even if it hurts. And then what? Desert my chapter? Betray my brothers? No." The thing shook its head. "I'm not asking you to betray anyone. I'm asking you to acknowledge the cost, to carry it consciously instead of burying it, to be an Astartes who remembers what humanity means." Castor stared at it. "That's not possible. The conditioning exists for a reason. We can't function if we're carrying that kind of emotional weight." "Can't you?" The thing tilted its head again. "Or is that just what your chapter tells you? What if the conditioning isn't protection? What if it's control? What if the Imperium strips away your humanity not because it makes you better warriors, but because it makes you obedient ones?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Castor wanted to reject it, wanted to raise his bolter and end this conversation with mass reactive rounds. But his finger stayed frozen on the trigger, because he didn't have an answer. In the Codex Astartes, there are detailed protocols for dealing with every imaginable threat. Tyranid swarms, flammers and suppressing fire, orc hordes, bolter discipline and defensive positions, chaos corruption, immediate execution and quarantine, demonic possession, sanctioned psyker support and emergency exorcism. But there's nothing in the Codex about this. Nothing about enemies that attack through memory. Nothing about threats that live inside your own head. Nothing about what to do when the cost of being an Astartes finally catches up with you. Castor accessed his suit's tactical database, searching for something. Anything. A doctrinal reference. A historical precedent. Some indication that other chapters had encountered this and developed a response. He found nothing. Either no one had survived this kind of attack to report it, or the reports had been sealed so deep that even a veteran sergeant couldn't access them. Which meant he was on his own. "My squad is dying," he said finally. "Whatever you're doing to them, stop it." "I'm not doing anything to them," the thing replied. "They're doing it to themselves. I'm just showing them what's already there. The cracks in their conditioning. The wounds that never healed. Some of them can't handle it. Their minds break. Their bodies follow. But that's not my doing, Jaren. That's your chapter's fault for building warriors on such fragile foundations. We're not fragile. We're the Emperor's finest. You're the Imperium's finest lies. There's a difference." Castor watched Brother Makar collapse, his armor's power system finally giving out. 3 warriors down. 3 more frozen and unresponsive. Only Castor remained functional, and even he could feel the conditioning starting to slip. Could feel Jaren pushing up from underneath the layers of transhuman psychology, demanding to be acknowledged. "What happens if I choose to remember?" he asked quietly. The thing's expression softened. For just a moment, it looked almost human again. Almost like the boy Castor had accidentally killed 7 decades ago. "You carry it said simply. "The guilt, the grief, the knowledge of what you've lost and can never get back. You carry it the way humans are supposed to, and it will hurt. Every day for the rest of your life, it will hurt. That's not a choice. That's a curse." "No," the thing shook its head. "It's freedom. Right now, you're not in control of yourself. Your chapter is. They programmed you, shaped you, made you into exactly what they needed. But if you choose to remember, if you choose to carry the cost consciously, then you're making your own decisions. You're human again, Jaren. Not a weapon. A person." Castor felt something inside him twist. A sensation he hadn't experienced in 70 years. Temptation. The thing was right about one thing: he was tired. Tired of serving. Tired of killing. Tired of pretending he was anything other than a broken child with a gun. The conditioning made it bearable, made it possible to function without drowning in regret. But it also made him a slave. What would it be like to choose? To really choose? Not just follow orders, but decide for himself what was right? His hand lowered. The bolter's barrel dipped toward the floor. "I can't," he whispered. "My brothers need me. The Imperium needs me. If I break now, you're already broken," the thing said gently. "You've been broken since you were 9 years old. The question is whether you want to stay broken or start healing." And that's when Brother Kelvane moved. He'd been silent for so long that Castor had assumed he was gone, catatonic or dead or lost somewhere in his own shattered memories. But Kelvane had been listening, processing, making his own terrible calculations. His bolter came up faster than Castor could react. The barrel swung toward the thing wearing the dead boy's face. And before Castor could shout a warning, Kelvane fired. The bolt round passed through the entity harmlessly as expected. It wasn't really there. Not physically, just a projection. A psychic presence wearing a familiar shape. But the round didn't stop. Kept going, past where the thing stood, and struck the bulkhead behind it. The mass-reactive warhead detonated on impact, punching through corroded metal and into whatever lay beyond. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the space Hulk screamed. Not metaphorically. The entire structure shuddered and shrieked like a wounded animal. Metal tore, bulkheads buckled, and Castor realized with horror what Kelvane had done. He hadn't been aiming for the entity. He'd been aiming for the structural weak point behind it. The place where the Space Hulk's corrupted infrastructure was barely holding together. One bolt round was all it took to start a catastrophic cascade failure. "No," Castor breathed. Kelvane's voice came across the Vox, steady and calm. "It's over, Sergeant. We can't fight this. Can't beat something that lives in our heads. But I can give you a clean death. All of us. Better than breaking. Better than remembering. He fired again and again, each shot precisely placed to maximize structural damage. The thing wearing the boy's face looked at Castor with something that might have been sadness. He's making a choice, a human choice, even if it's the wrong one. Stop him! Castor lunged toward Kelvane, but it was too late. The hull breach opened like a mouth. Atmosphere shrieked out into the void. Emergency bulkheads tried to seal but were too slow, too corroded, too broken by millennia of warp exposure. And the thing simply watched as the corridor tore itself apart, as the Astartes were sucked toward the breach, as everything dissolved into chaos. You should have chosen, it said to Castor. Its voice was fading now, pulled away by the decompression. You should have been brave enough to be human. Then it was gone, and Castor was tumbling through vacuum, his armor's seals barely holding, his squad scattered into the void. And in that moment, falling through the darkness between stars, Brother Sergeant Castor made his choice. The void is silent. This is what mortals don't understand about space combat. They imagine explosions and screaming and dramatic last stands. But the reality is quieter, more intimate. When your armor breaches and the air rushes out, you don't hear anything. You just feel your lungs compress. Feel the blood start to boil in your veins. Feel consciousness begin to fade. Except Astartes don't die that easily. Castor's SUS and membrane activated automatically, putting him into a state of suspended animation. His metabolism crashed to near zero. His consciousness dimmed but didn't extinguish. He could still think, still perceive, still feel the cold of space seeping through his armor's failing seals. And still remember, that was the thing's final gift. Or curse. The conditioning that should have snapped back into place, should have locked away the memories and made him Brother Sergeant Castor again, didn't activate. The psychic wounds the entity had opened refused to close. He was Jaren, 9 years old and terrified, watching his best friend fall. Except now he was also 70 years older, a veteran of 17 campaigns, drifting through the void in a body that was more machine than man. Both versions existed simultaneously, the child and the warrior, the human and the weapon, and neither could dominate the other. It was agony, not physical pain. His suspended animation took care of that. But psychic pain, the pain of being two people at once, of trying to hold contradictory identities in the same mind. He understood now what the thing had been trying to tell him. This was what it meant to be an Astartes. Not transcendence, not post-humanity, just trauma stacked on top of trauma, held together by conditioning and prayer and the desperate belief that suffering for the Emperor meant something. His helmet's chronometer counted seconds, minutes, hours. He was dying, slowly but inevitably. The SUS and membrane could only sustain him for so long. Eventually his hearts would stop, his brain would shut down, and Jaren/Castor would cease to exist. He found he didn't mind. At least he'd die knowing who he was. Both versions, the child and the warrior, the human and the weapon. At least he'd die honest. Then something grabbed him. The recovery team found him 3 hours later. Another squad from his chapter, responding to the distress beacon his armor had automatically deployed. They pulled him from the void, cycled him through their ship's decompression chamber, and rushed him to the apothecarium. Brother Apothecary Theron examined him with the cold efficiency that characterized their order, checked vitals, assessed damage, ran full genetic scans to ensure no warp corruption. Physically, you're intact, Theron said finally. Minor hypoxia, some tissue damage from exposure, nothing your Laraman cells can't handle. But your neural activity is abnormal. Castor lay on the examination slab, staring at the ceiling. His armor had been removed. Without it, he felt naked, vulnerable, small. What happened on that hulk, brother? We encountered something. Obviously, your entire squad is dead. I need specifics. It wasn't a physical threat. Castor's voice was quiet, distant. It was something else, something that got inside our heads. Theron's expression didn't change, but his hand moved toward a data slate, recording, documenting, Everything an Astartes experienced was chapter property, especially encounters with unknown threats. Describe it, Castor tried. He explained the entity, the memories, the way his brothers had broken one by one. He kept his descriptions clinical, factual, but he couldn't keep the tremor out of his voice when he reached the part about remembering his own past. Theron was silent for a long moment after Castor finished. What you're describing sounds like a Class 3 psychic revenant. Rare but not unprecedented. They feed on trauma and regret. Standard protocol is immediate sanctioning and psychic exorcism. Will that work? On you? Yes. Will reinforce your conditioning. Suppress the traumatic memories. Have you back on active duty within a month. Theron paused. But there's a problem. What problem? You haven't requested it. Castor met his eyes. No, I haven't. Why not? It was a good question. The correct answer, the answer a loyal Astartes should give, was that he wanted the treatment immediately. Wanted to be fixed. Wanted to go back to being Brother Sergeant Castor without all this painful self-awareness. But that wasn't the truth. Because I'm tired of forgetting, he said quietly. Tired of being told that the only way to serve is to stop being human. Tired of watching brothers die for an Imperium that doesn't care about them. Theron's hand moved away from the data slate, toward something else. A weapon, probably. Standard protocol for Astartes showing signs of psychological corruption. That's heresy, brother. Is it? Or is it just honesty? There's no difference. Not in our chapter. Not in our service. Theron's voice was harder now. You took oaths, Castor. You swore to serve the Emperor unto death, to put his will above your own, to become more than human. I was 9 years old when I took those oaths. Did I even understand what I was agreeing to? That doesn't matter. You're an Astartes now. What you were before is irrelevant. What if it's not? Castor sat up, despite his injuries. What if the thing we met on that hulk was right? What if we're not supposed to erase our humanity? What if it's supposed to be the foundation we build on, not the weakness we bury? Theron's weapon was in his hand now. A bolt pistol. Not aimed yet, just ready. Last chance, brother. Request the treatment. Let us fix what that entity broke. Or I'll be forced to classify you as compromised and take appropriate action. Castor looked at the pistol. Theron. At the apothecarium walls covered in chapter symbols and prayers to the Emperor. He thought about Taldrin, dying from the weight of his own memories. About Kelvane, choosing death over acknowledging what he'd become. About his whole squad, broken by something as simple as remembering who they used to be. And he thought about the choice the entity had offered him. To keep going as an Astartes or to be human again. Do it, he said finally. Theron's expression didn't change. Do what? Whatever you think is appropriate. I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to resist the treatment. But I'm also not going to ask for it. Castor lay back down. Make your choice, brother. Just like I made mine. The report went up the chain of command within the hour. Brother Sergeant Castor, veteran of 83 years of service, had encountered a psychic entity and suffered severe psychological damage. He was refusing standard treatment, showing signs of corrupted thinking, questioning fundamental chapter doctrine. The recommended action was immediate execution and gene seed harvest. But the report landed on the desk of Master Chaplain Orvain, and Orvain was old. Old enough to remember things that most of the chapter had forgotten. Old enough to have seen this before. He visited Castor in the apothecarium personally. Walk with me, he said. Not a request. An order. Castor stood. His body was healed now, the gene seed having worked its usual miracles. He followed Orvain through corridors he'd walked 1,000 times, but now they felt different. He noticed things he'd never paid attention to before. The servo skulls drifting past with their empty eye sockets. The servitors standing at attention with lobotomized smiles. The murals showing glorious battle scenes with no hint of the cost. They ended up in the chapter's memorial chamber. Walls covered in names. Thousands upon thousands of fallen brothers, recorded for posterity. Do you know what we do with the memories of the dead? Orvain asked. We remember them through prayer and service. No, Orvain shook his head. We don't. We record their names and ranks and service records. But who they were before they became Astartes, that's lost, erased, because we believe it doesn't matter. He turned to face Castor directly. But it does matter, doesn't it? You learned that on the Hulk. The entity showed you that what we bury doesn't disappear. It just waits. Castor felt his pulse quicken. You've encountered this before. Not personally, but I've seen the classified reports. Other chapters. Other encounters with entities that attack through memory. Orvain's expression was grim. The usual response is exactly what Theron recommended. Conditioning reinforcement, memory suppression, execution if that fails. But none of those solutions actually work. Why not? Because you can't kill truth by ignoring it. The entity on that Hulk wasn't wrong, Castor. It was cruel, perhaps, but not wrong. We do build Astartes on foundations of buried trauma. We do strip away humanity and call it improvement. And eventually, that cost catches up with us. Castor felt something loosen in his chest. Permission. Someone higher in the hierarchy was acknowledging what he'd experienced. Validating it. So what do I do? You have 3 options. Orvain counted them on his fingers. First, accept the treatment. Let the apothecaries suppress everything you learned. Go back to being Brother Sergeant Castor and pretend this never happened. What's the second option? Refuse treatment. Be declared corrupted. Face execution and gene seed harvest. And the third, Orvain smiled. It wasn't a kind smile, but it was human. You learn to carry both. The child and the warrior. The human and the Astartes. You become something new. Something our chapter has never seen before but desperately needs. That sounds impossible. It is. Almost. Orvain gestured to the walls around them. These brothers died believing they were protecting humanity. But how can we protect something we don't remember being? How can we serve humanity if we've forgotten what humanity means? He placed a hand on Castor's shoulder. I can't order you to choose. This has to be your decision. But I will say this. If you choose the third option, if you choose to remember and serve anyway, you'll be walking a path no one has successfully walked before. It will hurt, every day, and you'll never have the comfort of conditioning to dull the pain. But I'll be human. You'll be both, human and Astartes. And maybe that's what we were supposed to be all along. The Imperium runs on forgetting. This is the secret they don't put in the Imperial Infantryman's uplifting primer. The truth they don't mention in the Codex Astartes. The fundamental principle that makes the entire system function. Forget what you were before. Forget your family. Forget your home. Forget everything that made you human. And become a tool for the Emperor's will. It works. Mostly. Billions of soldiers and workers and servants give their lives without hesitation because they've been conditioned to believe their individual suffering doesn't matter. Only the Imperium matters. Only humanity's survival matters. But what happens when someone remembers? Castor chose the third option. Chose to carry both identities. The child and the warrior. Jaren and the Astartes. It was exactly as hard as Orvain warned. Every morning, he woke up remembering his friend's fall. Every battle, he felt the weight of every kill. Every prayer to the Emperor, he wondered if he was praying to a god or a corpse. The conditioning that had made him functional as an Astartes fought constantly with the memories that made him human. Some days he could barely get out of bed. But he did get out of bed, put on his armor, picked up his bolter, led his new squad on missions across the sector. Because Orvain was right. You can't protect humanity if you've forgotten what humanity means. His brothers noticed the change. Castor was different now. Quieter. More thoughtful. He still followed orders and killed the Emperor's enemies. But he did it with a kind of weight that hadn't been there before. Are you well, Sergeant? Brother Epistolary Matthias asked after one particularly difficult engagement. Castor was cleaning his bolter, hands working through the ritual maintenance. Define well. You seem troubled. I am troubled. We just killed 3,000 heretics. Men, women, children. Because they rejected the Imperial Creed and chose to worship something else. Matthias frowned. They were heretics. They deserved death. Did they? Did the children deserve it? The ones who were born into that belief system and never knew anything else. Castor looked up. Don't misunderstand. I'm not saying we shouldn't have killed them. Sometimes that's the only option. But I'm also not going to pretend it's glorious or righteous. We killed people today. That should matter. You're thinking like a mortal. I am a mortal, just an enhanced one. Castor returned to his weapon maintenance. We all are. That's what I learned on the Space Hulk. We're not angels or saints or divine instruments. We're just damaged humans given weapons and pointed at the Imperium's enemies. And ignoring that doesn't make us better warriors. It just makes us blind. Matthias was silent for a long time. Then, quietly, does it hurt? Remembering. Every day. Then why do it? Castor finished assembling his bolter and set it aside. Because the alternative is worse. I watched my brothers die on that Hulk. Saw them break when they were forced to remember what they'd buried. And I realized something. The conditioning doesn't protect us. It just delays the breaking until the moment it can kill us. He met Matthias's eyes. I'd rather carry the weight consciously than have it ambush me when I can't afford to fall apart. Word of Castor's condition spread through the chapter. Most brothers avoided him, treated him like he carried a contagion, which in a way he did. Self-awareness is dangerous in an institution built on obedience. But some sought him out, quietly, privately, brothers who'd felt the cracks in their own conditioning, who'd had moments of doubt or questions they weren't supposed to ask. Brother Librarian Kale was one of them. He found Castor in the chapel during midnight prayers. The other brothers had left. Castor remained, kneeling before the Emperor's altar, but not praying, just sitting in silence. I heard what happened on the Space Hulk, Kale said. Castor didn't turn. And I've been having dreams. Not visions. Dreams. About who I was before the chapter. My family. My home. Things I should have forgotten decades ago. Kale sat beside him. The conditioning usually suppresses them, but lately it's been failing. And I'm afraid. Afraid of what? That I'm being corrupted. That chaos is getting in. That I need to report myself for examination and reconditioning. Castor finally looked at him. Do you want to forget? Kale hesitated. I don't know. The dreams hurt, but they also feel important. Like something I need to remember. Then remember them. Hold on to them. Let them hurt. Castor stood. The entity on the Hulk taught me something. Our humanity isn't weakness. It's the only thing keeping us from becoming monsters. The Imperium wants us to forget because forgetting makes us easier to control. But we're stronger when we remember. That's not what the Codex says. The Codex was written by someone who thought Astartes should be tools. I'm saying maybe we're supposed to be something more. Kale stared at him. You're proposing heresy. I'm proposing honesty. There's a difference. Castor picked up his helmet. You don't have to report yourself, Kale. You don't have to ask for reconditioning. You can choose to carry the memories and serve anyway. It's harder. Much harder. But at least it's real. He walked toward the exit, then paused. We're going to die for the Imperium eventually. All of us. That's what we were made for. But we can choose whether we die as weapons or as humans. Make your choice. The reports reached the Inquisition eventually. An Astartes chapter dealing with psychological contamination. A sergeant showing signs of ideological corruption. Multiple brothers experiencing conditioning failure. Inquisitor Vex of the Ordo Hereticus arrived to investigate personally. She interviewed Castor in a sealed chamber, flanked by 2 Deathwatch veterans and a sanctioned psyker. Her questions were pointed, clinical, designed to expose heresy or chaos corruption. You claim the entity on the Space Hulk wasn't chaos? Correct. But it attacked your squad psychically, caused multiple casualties. That's consistent with demon behavior. It's consistent with many things. But it wasn't a demon. Castor kept his voice level. It was something else. something that emerged from human trauma and regret, not chaos-tainted, just wounded. And it convinced you to reject your chapter's conditioning. It didn't convince me of anything. It showed me what was already there. The cost of becoming an Astartes. The price we pay for transcending humanity. Vex leaned forward. Do you believe that price is too high? Here it was. The question that would determine whether he lived or died. Castor knew the correct answer. The answer that would satisfy the Inquisition and let him continue serving. He just needed to say no. Say the price was worth it. Say he'd gladly pay it again. Instead, he told the truth. Yes, he said quietly. The price is too high. We break children and call it recruitment. We erase identities and call it improvement. We create warriors who are so divorced from humanity that they can't understand what they're protecting. And we do it all in the name of the Emperor who never asked for this. Who wanted defenders of humanity, not weapons that have forgotten what humanity means. The room went silent. The Psyker's eyes widened. The Deathwatch veterans' hands moved toward their weapons. Vex herself sat perfectly still, her face unreadable. That's heresy, she said finally. That's honesty. Again, there's a difference. Not from where I'm sitting. Castor met her eyes. Then shoot me. I won't resist. I've said what I needed to say. If that's enough to condemn me, so be it. At least I'll die knowing who I was. Vex studied him for a long moment. Her hand rested on the bolt pistol at her hip. The Deathwatch veterans waited for her signal. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. Stand down, she told her guards. To Castor, you're not corrupted. You're just awake. And that makes you either the most dangerous thing I've encountered in a decade, or the most valuable. I don't understand. The Imperium is failing, Vex said bluntly. We're losing more worlds than we're saving. The enemies multiply faster than we can kill them. And we're doing it all with soldiers who don't question, citizens who don't think, and Astartes who've forgotten why they're fighting. She stood. What you're proposing, Astartes who remember their humanity, it's terrifying to the established order. But it might be exactly what we need. Warriors who actually understand what they're defending. Who fight not because they've been conditioned to, but because they've chosen to. You're not going to execute me? Not yet. She moved toward the door. But I'm watching you, Castor. Watching to see if this experiment works or if you fall to chaos like everyone fears. Because if you can prove that Astartes can carry their humanity and still serve, that changes everything. She paused at the threshold. And if you fail? If remembering breaks you the way it broke your brothers on that hulk? Then I'll be back. And next time, I won't hesitate. 3 years passed. Castor continued serving, continued leading missions, continued killing the Imperium's enemies. But he did it differently now. With awareness, with weight, with the full knowledge of what each death cost and why it might be necessary anyway. Some days were harder than others. Some days, the memories threatened to overwhelm him. The conditioning fought back, trying to suppress everything he'd learned. But he held on, kept choosing to remember, kept choosing to be both human and Astartes. Other brothers started coming to him. Not many, but enough. Warriors who'd felt cracks in their conditioning, who'd had doubts they weren't supposed to voice, who wanted to know if it was possible to serve the Emperor and still be human. Castor told them the truth. It was possible, but agonizing. Most chose reconditioning, chose to forget and go back to being simple weapons. Castor didn't blame them. The path he'd chosen was brutal, but some chose to remember, chose to carry the weight. And slowly, quietly, a new kind of Astartes began to emerge within the chapter. Warriors who prayed to the Emperor but questioned the Imperium, who killed when necessary but mourned the cost, who served humanity because they remembered what humanity meant. Master Chaplain Orvain watched this development with cautious hope. You're starting something, he told Castor during one of their private meetings. Something the Imperium won't like. I'm not trying to start anything. I'm just trying to survive without losing myself. That's how all revolutions begin, with one person refusing to pretend anymore. Castor shook his head. This isn't a revolution. I'm not trying to overthrow the Imperium or reject the Emperor. I'm just saying we can serve better if we remember why we're serving. And if the High Lords disagree, if they decide that Astartes who question are too dangerous to tolerate, then they'll kill us. Castor shrugged. But at least we'll die as humans. That has to count for something. The thing on the Space Hulk had been right about one thing. There are no easy answers. The Imperium needs soldiers. Needs warriors willing to die without hesitation for humanity's survival. And maybe conditioning is necessary for that. Maybe you can't create reliable defenders of mankind without stripping away some of their humanity first. But maybe there's another way. Maybe you can have warriors who are both human and transhuman, who serve by choice rather than conditioning, who fight not because they've forgotten what death means, but because they've remembered what life is worth protecting. Castor didn't know if his path was sustainable, didn't know if carrying both identities would eventually break him the way it broke his brothers on the Hulk. Didn't know if the Inquisition would lose patience and execute him for ideological corruption. But he kept going anyway, because the entity had given him one other gift besides truth. It had given him a choice, the freedom to decide who he was and how he served. And even if that choice led to his death, even if remembering eventually destroyed him, at least it would be his death. His destruction, his choice. And in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, where most people died as statistics and were forgotten before their bodies cooled, dying as yourself was a kind of victory. Brother Sergeant Castor stood on the bridge of the strike cruiser Adamant Will, watching a planet die. Exterminatus, authorized by the Inquisition, necessary to prevent a chaos cult from spreading to neighboring systems. 2 billion people erased in fire because a few thousand had turned traitor. He felt it. Every death, every scream cut short, every family torn apart, every life ended for the crime of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The old Castor wouldn't have felt anything, would have watched the destruction and seen only strategic necessity, acceptable losses in the eternal war for humanity's survival. But Jaren felt it, and Castor was Jaren now, had chosen to be Jaren, had decided that carrying the weight was better than pretending it didn't exist. So he stood there and felt it all. Let it hurt, let it matter, because if he didn't feel it, if he became numb to this kind of horror, then what was the point? What was he protecting if he couldn't even acknowledge what was being lost? Sergeant, Brother Matthias stood beside him. He'd chosen to remember too, had been dealing with his own buried memories. Are you well? Castor smiled. It wasn't a happy expression. No, but I'm honest, and that's better than well. He turned from the view screen. Come on, we have another mission. More enemies to kill, more horrors to witness, and we'll do it all while remembering what it costs. Because that's what makes us different from monsters. Different how? Monsters kill without caring. We kill while caring, while feeling it, while carrying the weight of every life we take. Castor started walking toward the armory. It's not much, but it's enough. Has to be. So here's my question for you, and I want you to really think about this before you answer in the comments. If you could remember everything you sacrificed to become strong, would you? If you could carry the full weight of every cost, every loss, every person you've hurt or left behind, but that memory would hurt you every single day for the rest of your life, would you choose to remember? Because that's what this story is really about. Not Space Marines, not the warp, but the choice between comfortable ignorance and painful truth. The Astartes chose to forget. The Imperium demands forgetting. But Castor chose to remember, and that choice made him more terrifying to the established order than any demon or Xenos threat could ever be. Hit that like button if this one made you think. Subscribe if you want more stories that challenge what you thought you knew about 40K. And drop a comment telling me, are Astartes stronger when they forget their humanity, or when they remember it? Because in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, maybe the most dangerous thing you can do is remember what you're actually fighting for.